Hello everybody and welcome. Been wanting to make a video for you all for some time, so here's another one, and let me know what you want for future videos. This one is going to be on a little writing called The Training of the Mind by Alan Bennett, who was a instructor of Crowley's when he first got into the Golden Dawn, way back when he was just starting. He was a neophyte magician, so to speak. But this is from a Buddhist standpoint, but it's very good on certain aspects, and I'm going to point out how this also relates to Barden's work, especially the first and second chapters of Barden's work, which, if you've looked through them, Franz Barden, for those who might not know, a Czechoslovakian magician, and you'll find lots of stuff on this channel where he comes up and is mentioned. But this will throw some highlights on some aspects that Barden doesn't mention. For instance, in chapter 2 of his first book, Initiation to Hermetics, he mentions the asana and tells you you're to sit in 30 minutes in this one position twice a day and be able to do that. But he doesn't talk about what is required to actually accomplish that and what kind of mystical effects that can have, things like that. So I'm going to go through this a little bit at a time, and I'll try, and all the terms used are like basically Indian, Buddhist. So in addition to mispronouncing them, not on purpose, I will attempt to render them in language intelligible to someone who isn't familiar with all the terms, and there's a lot of them. I'll do my best, and we'll see how that goes. So I'm going to read from this little book while we do this. Well, it's in a big book, but it's a little writing. So one of the first terms that we run across is chitta, spelled C-I-T-T-A. What that means is your thought stuff, okay? Thought material, your thoughts, thinking, is shown to consist of innumerable elements. Now, they use a couple Indian words there. In this case, Dhamma or Shankara. But it's tendencies of the mind. If we translate this as tendencies, we shall probably come nearest to the English meaning of the word. When a given act has been performed a number of times, when a given thought has arisen in our mind a number of times, there is a definite tendency to repetition of that act, thus a definite tendency to recurrence of that thought. I often describe this type of thing as like gradually wearing a groove in something. It becomes easier and easier. So each of these tends to produce constantly its like, and in turn to be reproduced. So you end up, this part of you, their thought stuff, your mind, ends up composed of all these different tendencies. Okay. And not all of them are bad, of course. You want the good ones. But you can use these things to suppress their own I'll just read you the sentence. But while our master has taught us the tendency to reproduce that is so characteristic of all mental states, he has also shown us how this reproductive energy of the Shankaras may itself be employed to the suppression of evil states and to the cultivation of states that are good. So in this context is often used the analogy of digging a thorn out of you by use of another thorn. So that's the idea. And you can definitely overcome these evil tendencies by the practice of mental concentration on tendencies of an opposite nature. In practice, by devoting a definite time each day to meditating on thoughts of pity and of love. Now this goes to, Barton speaks of this practice in his first couple chapters, especially in chapter 2, by using, he gives some methods of auto-suggestion and to fight these tendencies with willpower and to work on promoting their opposite. So he's talking about the same practice. You know, if you have a tendency to be upset all the time, you can give yourself the practice, the repetition through autosuggestion of, I am always calm. And that's one of my issues. So I want to always be calm. So you can fight these things by their opposites. And this is one of Barton's practices, comes up in chapters 1 and 2, especially in chapter 2. And we must keep in mind that in attempting to do these exercises of Barton's, they're going to require a certain amount of willpower. For most people, these things won't be easy off the bat, and especially to get up to the level of achieving the first chapter can require some willpower and some effort. Therefore, do those evil tendencies of his nature, those tendencies to anger and cruelty, disappear before the rise of new good tendencies of love and pity, even as the darkness of the night fades in the glory of the dawn. Well, apparently he was feeling a little flowery. So, in his opinion, the best way of overcoming these bad tendencies is the systematic cultivation by dint of meditation on qualities that are opposed to the evil tendencies we wish to eliminate. Okay. And he feels that this is the key to the entire system of the purification and culture of the mind, which constitutes the practical working basis of the Buddhist religion. I would also point out in this that during this writing, I like this writing quite a bit. He was a relatively new Buddhist, in my opinion, by the time he started writing this. He says, but the energy lies hidden in every human brain. It is generated with every pulsation of every human heart. It is the prerogative of every human being and the sole mover in the world of men. There is no idea, good or bad, there's no idea or thought accomplished in this world, but that supreme energy, the steam power of our mental mechanism, is the mover and cause. Of course, steam power because, well, that's an old document. It is by this power that the Buddha conquered the hearts of men. It is by this force that so many have followed him on the way which he declared the Nirvana Marga, the way to the unutterable peace. The name of that power is mental concentration, and there is nothing in this world for good or evil, but is wrought by its application. It weaves upon the loom of time the fabric of men's characters and destinies. If these tendencies or Shankaras act well together, If their varying functions are well coordinated, then that man has great power, for good or for evil. And I would add man or woman. Like I say, old document, so you might run across some archaic, well, maybe not archaic, but old-timey perspectives and things. When you see one of weak mind and will, you can be assured that the shankaras or tendencies are working against one another. And so the central power, this power of samadhi, is wasted in one part of the mind and overcoming its own energy in another. And we haven't said what samadhi is, but a brief description is a state in which you get engrossed in the object of your contemplation and meditation to the point where you become that object of your meditation and concentration and perceive that object through mystic insight and union with it, which in my opinion is also a big aspect of a form of clairvoyance. And you can really learn mystical secrets about objects through this means if you can make samadhi on them. It's also not particularly easy for most people to do without prolonged concentration exercises. And that's, again, another aspect of which Barden is leading up to, and which you're getting started on with his mental concentration exercises, which you start with in the first couple of chapters. So thus, according to this, in the writings of Alan Bennett, the practical methods then for the culture and purification of the mind, according to the method indicated to us by our master, and I don't know the name of his master at the time he was writing this. First, the accurate reflection upon things in order to ascertain their nature. And secondly, the bringing to bear upon the mind of the powers of concentration to the end that the good states may become powerful tendencies in our being. So we have first very accurately to analyze gives, the autosuggestion, the fighting it with willpower, and those things. And of course, in Barden's case, he takes an emphasis upon the aspects of the elements, which I think is a good improvement upon this method. By mental concentration is meant an intentness of the thoughts, the thinking for a definite time of only one thought at a time. This will at first be found to be very difficult. You sit down to meditate on love, for instance, and you will soon find in half a minute or so that you are thinking about what somebody said yesterday. So it always is at first. The Buddha likened the mind of the man who was beginning this practice of samadhi to a calf which had been used to running hither and thither in the fields without any let or hindrance, which has now been tied with the rope to a post. And this is a particular image that's used over and over again in Zen, in Buddhism, and in various forms where they talk about this meditation. In particular, in a lot of them, the mind is reckoned like an ox that's tied. Does this say a calf? Yeah, calf. A lot of times they use the imagery, especially in Zen, of the ox and stalking the ox and catching the ox and tying it. Anyway, the rope is the practice of meditation. The post is the particular subject for meditation. At first, the calf tries to break loose. He runs hither and thither in every direction, but is always brought up sharp at a certain distance from the post by the rope to which he is tied. At last the calf becomes more calm. He sees the futility of struggling and lies down by the side of the post. So it is with the mind. So and he says, this takes a long time to attain. And I can tell you that attaining the first chapter of Barton's book up to Barton's requirements took me what I thought was an extraordinarily long time. And I think most people will attain it much sooner, but it can be very difficult. And for me, I'm not happy unless I can say 100% that I've got it, that I do something completely according to the requirements. And as Barton states, you shouldn't let yourself off too easy on these kind of things if you want true success. And this takes a long time to attain. It's very hard practice. In order that we may make this the most trying part of our practice easier, various methods are suggested. And Barton mentions these methods and requires you, well, they're part of the first and second chapters, but he doesn't specifically mention all the results and things. One is that we can avail ourselves of the actions of certain tendencies themselves. You know how we get into the habits of doing certain things, particularly habits of doing things at a definite time of the day. Thus we get into the habit of waking up at a definite time of the morning, and we always tend to wake at the same hour of the day, etc., etc. He goes on for a bit about that. In effect, the practice of any act, the persistence of any given set of ideas, regularly occurring at a time of the day, forms within us a very powerful tendency towards the recurrence of those ideas, or the practice of that act at the same time every day. Now we can make use of this time habit of the mind to assist us in our practice of meditation. Choose a given time of day. Always practice in that same time, even if it is only for 10 minutes, but always at exactly the same time of day. And Barton speaks to this a little bit, but I think it's pretty important. In a little while, the mind will have established a habit in this respect, and you will find it much easier to concentrate your mind at the usual time than at any other. We should also consider the effect of bodily actions on the mind. If we have just eaten a meal, the major part of the spare energy in us goes to assist the work of digestion, and so at those times the mind is sleepy and sluggish, and under these circumstances we cannot use all of our energy to concentrate with. So choose a time when the stomach is empty. Of course, the best time from this point of view is when we wake up in the morning. And also he goes into the aspects of silence, having silence, okay? These things are kind of the basics for meditation. Silence and not being disturbed, of course. And those kind of things kind of go without saying largely, but if you can do it at the same time, that's pretty important and useful. Another thing that very much affects these tendencies, and that is place. If you think a little, you will see how tremendously place affects the mind. The merchant's mind may be full of trouble, but no sooner does he get to his office or place of business than the trouble goes and he is all alert. A keen, capable businessman. The doctor may be utterly tired out and half asleep when he is called up to attend an urgent case, but no sooner has he come to his place, the place where he is wont to exercise his profession, the bedside of his patient, and the powerful associations of the place overcome his weariness and mental torpor, and he is very wide awake, all his faculties on the alert, his mind working to the full limits demanded by his very difficult profession. The effect of place upon the mind is always to awaken a particular set of tendencies. Also, there is perhaps a certain yet intangible yet operative atmosphere of thought which clings to places in which definite acts have been done, definite thoughts constantly repeated. It is for this reason that we have a great sense of quiet and peace when we go to a monastery. The monastery is a place where life is protected, where men think deeply of the great mysteries of life and death. It is the home of those who are devoted to the practice of meditation. It is the center of the religious life of the people. So basically, skip a few paragraphs here where he waxes on floridly about such things, which are okay. But the upshot is we should choose for our practice of meditation a place which is suited to the work we have to do. And I'm going to point out that, as I mentioned, all these things, they're all ideals, but you shouldn't not try to accomplish the practices and meditations if you can't meet the ideals of all these conditions. The more important thing is doing the meditations and things. The better you can arrange these other things, the easier they will be for you, but it doesn't mean if you can't arrange, a perfect spot or something that you shouldn't do it. Instead, it might be better to exercise your willpower by working through any obstacles to strengthen yourself by doing them anyway. Don't go for the obstacles unless you're particularly trying to strengthen your willpower. But if obstacles are there and you can't arrange things perfectly, do the practices anyway until such time as the obstacles are overcome or can be moved or something. It is a great aid, of course, if we can have a special place in which nothing but these practices are done, where no one but ourselves goes, but for a layman this is very difficult to secure. Time and place being once chosen is important until the faculty of concentration is strongly established, not to alter them. The bodily posture is to be considered, and this Barden goes into in the second chapter with his aspects on the asana, which is actually a pretty important practice. If we stand up to meditate, then a good deal of our energy goes to maintain the standing posture. Lying down is also not good because it is associated in our minds with falling asleep. Therefore, the sitting posture is best. If you can sit cross-legged as Buddha Rupa sit, that is best, according to Alan Bennett. I agree with Barden. The seated position in a chair is ideal. He says this position is best because it has many good shankaras or tendencies associated with it in the minds of Buddhist people. And that's all he says about it right there, to my surprise. Okay, so I'm going to add something to that. The asana practice, this type of success at this type of asana practice, when you sit in the asana, it can have some profound effects. First off, when you're sitting in the asana, you should be still, completely still, and move your body as little as possible. Barden recommends a position of sitting in a chair, knees together, feet together, hands resting easily on your thighs, back straight and not leaning against the back of a chair. And he says you can lean against the back of a chair to start with. I would add you need to be thoroughly still in this position, but not stiff. You need to be, when you're sitting in the asana, your body, to be able to do it effectively, and so that you can meditate, first off, your body needs to know the position thoroughly. So it needs to be very used to sitting in that position. You need to be very still when you're in the position. And have your body as relaxed as possible. You want all your muscles to be as relaxed as possible while maintaining the asana without letting your back slump, keeping your chin normal, your eyes forward, or unless you're doing something with your eyes, like looking at your third eye. But basically, keep your body straight and still. And if you can attain this complete stillness for long enough, you'll get what one Japanese author calls the off sensation. This is a feeling that comes up in your body, and your body literally becomes less and less noticeable to you. As things calm down and become still, you feel an ease and a rest. And in fact, if you succeed at this asana well enough, and if you were letting it affect you fully, this can be as effective if you're just sitting in the asana and not practicing other exercises in it, as it can be as rejuvenative to your body as getting sleep and rest. It will become very, very pleasant and comfortable to do. But you have to let it go up through you. You have to let it be in you, and you have to be able to be that still. And also let it, if you let it affect you fully, you can let your emotions become still. Barden recommends, he mentions these things in his book, Accomplish This, Accomplish That. I recommend practicing the asana practice without any other concentration exercises except vacancy of mind until you can do it for the 30 minutes that Barden recommends, and let that feeling of the body go up into your emotions and still your emotions, and it will go up into your mind and it will quiet your mind, and everything will become quiet and still. And then things become peaceful and harmonious, and reaching the stage where the asana affects your mind and your emotions and everything may take a while, but as you practice this, it will. And also, you should be aware and cautious of your breathing. When you're doing this practice, the asana practice, you don't want to if you have thoughts in your mind, and a lot of people, thoughts bring up emotions and they bring up tensions in the body, and people will tighten up different parts of their body. So to practice this asana well and really achieve the benefits, I recommend the quieting of the mind, as Barden says in the second chapter. The vacancy of mind exercises have to be improved and deepened, and this is the perfect time to doing them during this asana. And you're not just being vacant of mind, though. You're not falling asleep. You also have to have the awareness of your body, just enough awareness of your body to not slump, to maintain your asana, but not more than necessary, and enough awareness of your breathing so that your breathing doesn't change or shift. Your breathing deepens naturally as you relax, so that thoughts don't affect your breathing, and eventually the thoughts slow down and you don't have them, and you're completely at peace and at ease, which is Barden recommends. He says, do this exercise until you're completely at peace and at ease and can do it without any interruptions. But he doesn't mention that it can affect you so profoundly, astrally, emotionally, mentally, and it will. So though he doesn't mention it or point it out, if you really accomplish these exercises of his, you're achieving a lot in a lot of mystical mental states, even by the second chapter, which is really kind of a beginning of his first work. So the asana thing is very important and very useful, and I'm surprised that nobody in these things has expounded on it that much. I highly recommend it. I also do the lotus position, but the one I really focus on is the one Barden recommends for practicing his exercises for various reasons. But we'll go on from there. I just wanted to point out some of those aspects. So he says, We have seen how a powerful Shankara tendency, if that is pronounced as an S instead of an SH at the beginning, apologies for my mispronunciation. I don't see I'm not sure if the emphasis in the book is correct. I guess it's spelled with an S, so I should just pronounce it as an S and an SH, making it a Sankara, I believe. Is formed in one of two ways, either by one tremendous effort of concentration or by many slight ones. Now here comes Barden's exercise, basically, or the exercise mentioned by Barden in the second chapter. As it is difficult for a beginner to make a tremendous effort, it would be found simplest to take one idea which can be expressed in a few words and repeat those words silently over and over again. Thus, the autosuggestion. The reason for use of the formula for words is that owing to the complexity of the brain actions involved in the production of words, very powerful tendencies are formed by this habit of silent repetition. The words serve as a very powerful mechanical aid in constantly evoking the idea they represent. In order to keep the number of times the formula has been repeated, in order to keep count of the number of times the formula has been repeated, Buddhist people use a rosary of 108 beads, and this will be found a very convenient aid. And Barden suggests if you don't have this, to tie knots in a string and count those. That idea. And you repeat these things many, many times. And every time you repeat this, it shouldn't be just spooling it off. It should be with feeling, thought, and perception of what it represents, and done according to Barden's present tense, not as in I will accomplish this, but this is not, I will be calm, but I am calm, or I remain calm, that type of thing, instead of getting anger or whatever it is you're trying to produce. Each time of repetition, passing over one of the beads of the rosary. And I think that's all we're going to go into about that little text right now. And this will give you some ideas. These things that Barden has you do, even in the first two chapters are very powerful. They form a basis for the rest of his work, but they themselves are very powerful in causing a transformation of the individual, and especially if you take them seriously. I guess I would say that the prime requisite of succeeding at Barden's work is in order to be able to do these things and these practices, you need to desire to transform yourself into a better, more well-rounded and nicer person. Unless you're one of the rare people who are already there. There are a few. It's pretty rare. Can't say that I've met anybody that was, anyway, beside the point though. Very useful practices, and I thought it would be good to point out a little more because Barden packed so much into the book. The book would be just humongous and comprise 10 volumes if he said everything he could say or wanted to say about the different exercises and practices he gives you. But I think some of these ideas may help some of the people having potential difficulties with some of his practices, especially succeeding at the first chapter, the quieting of the thoughts, all those things. And for some people, they might be easy. I also wanted to add another little thing on there for people that I've discovered myself that I was doing to keep in mind. Because I knew I had read lots of other literature on the subject, I knew that some of these practices are considered very difficult, and you don't want to feel like these practices are difficult when you're doing them. It seems that I was creating some blockages for myself by feeling and building up a thought form that this was going to be a difficult practice. And so it became much more difficult for me. While you're doing these practices, feel free to think that they're easy and comfortable and good, but also you need to do this with the awareness that it will probably take all your effort, or perhaps, to get past it. But keep the perception within yourself. It's easy, it's comfortable, it's helpful. It's going to be of great benefit to you, those kind of things, and not that they're difficult, because you can put obstacles in your own way. While honestly they can be very difficult, you don't want to, you might need to accept that, but you don't want to put that more in your way and make it more of an obstacle for yourself by dwelling on it or considering it at any way. When you're practicing it, they're just, this is what you're doing. You don't have to, this is what you're doing. You're just doing it now, or your attention is focused on it. So I hope this is some help to people. I want to put out videos that have some interest to people. So I appreciate any tips or help or advice or thoughts or general ideas on types of things you'd like to hear. My focus generally anymore, I would prefer to focus on enlightenment and bettering yourself and Barden's works and magic of that sort. While I was really into Crowley for a while, I don't want to do more stuff with his work because I finally determined within myself that I believe he was not on a path of perfection, a path to perfection, but not that his stuff was invalid at all, because it's not, but it's slightly off the path that I wish to obtain, and that the path I wish to follow is that of the true initiate, as Barden mentions it and as he speaks of it. And I think that Crowley didn't have the information he needed and was also swept off the path a little bit by the Akasha, and that's part of the reason, well, I don't want to go further into that, but all the negativism associated with Crowley and stuff is a good enough reason I don't want to tap into that. So we'll leave that at that. So I would like to continue to do videos on magic towards the area of enlightenment and illumination and progress of the individual. And on those subjects, I would be very glad to hear what you would recommend, any what you would like to know, those kind of things. So if you wish to leave comments, please feel free to leave comments, and those things that you would like to know. I have studied many different subjects and am interested in many. Yeah, let me know, and we'll see what we can do about keeping the subject interesting to all of you out there. Thank you for watching my video. Blessed be.